Okay, we are now recording, so welcome everyone to our weekly call. If you're catching a recording, I hope you had a fantastic weekend. In fact, even if you're on the call live, I hope you had a fantastic weekend as well. Let me just briefly share my screen by way of a reminder of our plans for the call. Just to underline the fact we've moved on to winter time now, daylight savings time. So our calls start from now through to March 1600 UTC, which for some of us will be basically the same time because all our clocks have adjusted. But for anyone in time zone where that's not happened yet or isn't planned to happen at all, just do bear that in mind. Okay, in terms of the call today, the main focus of the call will be SNI versus DNS. That's just a sort of shorthand. The intent is to sort of talk about the reliability of SNI and its relative merits versus DNS. Bob Blair from Broadcom is going to kick off that discussion. Then assuming he joins in time, I can't see him on the call at the moment, Zied Turki from BNP Paribas is going to give us an enterprise eye view of the topic as well, which I thought would be actually quite useful to get both, if you like, Broadcom's and then the BNP Paribas perspective. And then, as always, we'll open up the discussion for any questions, comments from anybody else. Depending on how we get on time-wise, I will just quickly revisit the IETF agenda if we do have time. Now, there's a few more details of some of the working group agendas which have now been published, which wasn't the case when we had a discussion last week. Regardless of whether we have time for that, we'll also, as always, cover some of the recent news items from the weekly headlines, a quick reminder of some forthcoming events and future call topics, and again, time permitting, any other business at the end. So that's the plan for the call. Hopefully that's in line with your expectations. I can see Zied has indeed joined, so welcome Zied as well. Zied, I will say that properly, I hope. But let me stop sharing then first and hand over Bob to you to give us your thoughts, and then we'll, as I say, we're seamlessly then get input from Zied and then open up to wider conversation and see where that takes us.
Thank you. I'll apologize. Majority of my content's based on this TLS SNI investigation work that I did a few months ago. I have more to say on that than I do on DNS. So please feel free to interject any of the DNS side of things as we go across. If there's any questions, feel free to interrupt at any point in time. I'm more than happy to stop and take some questions. I was interested in knowing how often the SNI, the service name indicator, we're probably getting some grade stuff there, right? Okay. Was incorrectly specified as compared to the subject alternative name, the SAN, the certificate details. Let me build these out. So, in other words, how often does the SAN not have a matching SNI entry? The SNI indicates to the web server which service it intends to connect to, and web servers typically host many domains behind them using a common server certificate. The SNI is part of the client hello, and it can be user generated or modified. So that's a big key problem. It can also, since it's in the client hello and we're not doing encrypted client hello yet, it's also a value that's in the clear and can be gleaned by any devices on the wire. It should not be trusted, but it should be verified. And we'll get into that in a little bit. The other thing is the SAN. It is a list of domain the server certificate supports. So these are all the domains behind that one server certificate. The SNI should match one of the SAN entries if it was properly formatted. Since the certificate and associated SAN, they're issued by an issuing certificate authority, and that is signed, it should typically be trusted and unmodifiable. So the SAN is king, so to speak. So what I did is I performed some TLS session log analysis work using my Splunk app. So what I did is I grabbed some session logs for over course of periods of time on two different types of networks. One network is a prosumer type network, my home network, where I have TLS interception enabled, which contains a lot of various kinds of devices as you would expect in a home. It's also my home office, so I also have corporate traffic on this network. And then I compared that to some corporate network traffic logs that I have. They were anonymized for me, so I don't know the actual customer, but it included the details that I needed to do this analysis. So this is what I did. Trust but verify. So security appliances that perform policy matching based on SNI alone, they will typically make wrong decisions for policies. End users can circumvent security policies that way. They can stop the browser, change the SNI, and continue it, and so forth. Or craft up their own. And that will fool those security appliances to thinking that you're going to someplace safe, where in fact you're going someplace not so safe, or a bad site. Instead, the more robust security appliances will make an initial policy decision based on the SNI. Once the server certificate has been retrieved, that SAN list is evaluated. If the SNI is present in the SAN and matches, the initial policy decision is binding. That was a properly formatted SNI going to the proper server certificate that contained the SAN. But what if it doesn't match? Well, the security appliance should disregard the initial policy match because it's not trusted. And it needs to evaluate the entire SAN list, attempting to match a policy. So if that security appliances applies risk scores or website type categorization, et cetera, on it, it will need to do that for every one of the SAN entries. So many times, that's a lot more work that needs to be performed by these appliances. Many times, applying a default policy if no matches are found. So a lot of times, they have a default policy, either a block or allow traffic, as compared to decrypting or not decrypting the traffic. So a typical topology would have corporate users behind an inline security appliance that actually has some security analytics attached to it for advanced analysis of the traffic. I utilized a similar type of topology to this and sent traffic, have policies that restrict gambling shopping based on user IPs and things like that. And we categorize our traffic so that we know the types of sites that people are going to, and we can block or allow based on type. So it was an inline inspection appliance. All traffic flowed through us to reach web resources, whether that was DNS traffic, a non-TLS, TCP, UDP traffic, all that went through this and would be available in the logs traffic. What I did with the log traffic, since I was mostly focused on TLS sessions, I filtered the traffic based on TLS session details. It does require decryption for this analysis, not because even though the client hello is in the clear, the server certificate details are not, and typically for TLS 1.3. So I had quite a bit of 1.3 traffic in the log, so it made it impossible for us to evaluate the SAN if we were not decrypting intercepting that traffic. In addition to the end user traffic, there's also a lot of what I call the device initiated traffic or non-human initiated traffic, namely Internet of Things, API calls, et cetera, that are always present on the network, even though you may not be aware of it. And the TLS session logs will report an entry for each new TLS connection that was requested. What does that mean? Long-lived TLS sessions have a single entry, and occasionally we'll get updates and things like that. But the short-lived sessions show up more frequently, and they dominate the log quantity. And what I found is the long-lived TLS session traffic there was usually typically a browser and a human behind that, or some streaming service or something like that, whereas the short-lived sessions were dominated by Internet of Things traffic. So what did I find? The home traffic, the matched traffic. So this is all the top matched traffics, so to speak. So every session that was established on the right-hand side had the proper SNI and the SAN entry as they're are listed there. Some of the things that come to mind is there's some Internet of Things traffic. Alexa, ironically, is adhering to some protocol hygiene there. Alarms, cameras, gaming, smart TVs, and things like that. As you go down through the list, you can see search engine details as in there, Google API, and so forth. Some of my Broadcom authentication traffic and so forth, Apple and Office and so forth. So that was all goodness. The sample set was 16,000 sessions recorded over a 24-hour period. So out of the matched traffic, 15% of all new sessions had correctly matching SNI and SAN. So even though this is good, it's a far cry to the 85% of traffic that did not match. So mismatched traffic. So do you follow where I'm at now? Assume so. So mismatched traffic is when the SNI, as purported in the client hello, did not show up in the SAN listing. This list, I broke it out and kind of tried to categorize it into 4 different types of traffic. One type is Google traffic, Google related domain traffic. So that was 29% of all new sessions that were Google initiated were improperly formatted, so to speak. Apple rose up there in 3rd place, as you'll see, where the CloudKit, the iCloud, and Apple.com itself, and then OCSP was interesting there. As probably not expected, but there's always going to be a lot of ad traffic that corresponds with the browser traffic, and there's 4 categories of ad traffic, double verify, and so forth, that actually accumulated 18% of these sessions. So the majority of new sessions, the vast majority of new sessions on this network had improperly formatted client hellos as compared to where they actually were going and on the SAN. These sessions were established, by the way, so I was not blocking traffic. And many of the times in my network, I'm inspecting, but I'm not taking action to the majority of it, or I'm just monitoring traffic. And by monitoring it, I can use categories to block things like the bad sites and known botnets and so forth. So interesting to see some large organized organizations use incorrect SNI values, non-conformant TLS stack. Now let's take a different perspective. Let's look at what a typical corporate network would have. Positioning of the TLS analysis appliance is important. This one was positioned behind the VPN concentrators. So we're seeing a lot of VPN domain traffic. So that's good to see that their VPN and their hosted services and so forth are properly configured correctly. This sample set was 2.4 million session records, and it was over 30 days. I did go back to my other home network traffic and did start do comparisons over 7 days and 30 days. And I found that a 1-day sample set was indicative of what my network usually sees on a typical workday. And this was interesting being across a whole month. Luckily and nicely, 97% of all new sessions had properly matching SNI and SAN. So that's very healthy in my opinion. Is there less mismatch? Many flows are hidden behind the VPN tunnels, so there could have been flows being established that I cannot see. And more than likely, I did see a little bit of traffic from going to Samsung and some other places that were in a very small minority. So there were some Internet of Things type traffic. Typically, the smart TVs in the offices and things like that, they still have the ability, if they're not blocked, to actually phone home and send telemetry as they do. And they typically should be allocated into a DMZ or separated from end user traffic, if at all possible. So what mismatch for this customer, for this data set? They had a lot of their own customer applications. So 65% of the traffic was their own homegrown, what looks like, based on the domains, were homegrown applications. So, application developers aren't network engineers, so they use pre-built stacks. So most likely that's the fault of the stack that they're using. Oddly, Akamai consumed 16% of it. I would have thought that Akamai would have been a little more, had a little better hygiene there. Google was only 3%, so far cry from what I was seeing, much lower, which is nicer. And then these other categories. The other categories were some sites in overseas. This was a North American customer, and container type traffic. The Docker traffic, for instance, there. So my conclusion, yes, in fact, the wild World Wide Web, the SNI field is not always properly defined by the client's applications. The percentages were a lot higher than first expected. This kind of started with a conversation where we thought the SNIs were relatively reliable, and that people, even though people could modify them, that there would probably be a sub 1% or very small amount of traffic that's in the wild that would be mismatched, because that's what we were expecting. As you can see, it was not the case. The placement of the analysis appliances matters. You could probably repeat this analysis on multiple different networks without much effort. It's just a Splunk dashboard, and you feed your logs into it. IoT and non-human initiated traffic is a lot of short-lived connections. They dwarf your logs. When you're trying to find someone that has a long-lived connection, the logs roll over so fast for IoT types, access to IoT servers, which was also purported that thought that these types of devices would phone home and nail up a connection. We thought that these Alexas and so forth were keeping persistent connections up, but that is not the case. They phone home very, very often, very frequently. They have very short-lived connections, and thus the load balancers can do their work much more easily. If they hadn't, these IoT servers would have to scale to a massive scale, and not be cost effective. As I mentioned, application developers are not network engineers, so their shared libraries for network protocol conformance are not as robust or QA'd for strict adherence to protocol specifications. I would also report that malware also falls into that category. However, the malware developers are somewhat network engineers as well. So mismatch sessions can cause multiple problems. It does cause security appliances to do more work. Multiple policy enumerations could be searched to infinity because it does not exist. You have to go through every possible entry, and these entries can be very large. It basically will increase the time before first byte. So as you're establishing these handshakes to establish the connection, it will increase latency slightly, just as the policies have to be reevaluated. That was pretty much what I had today. Any questions? Apologize, it's a miss of some major DNS details, but
Kurt's put a couple of queries in the chat just to sort of flag those first. Bob, the client.wns.windows.com was at Microsoft phoning home was the sort of first.
Not sure. Where was that one?
I think that was in. I think I was on your corporate list. I thought, but I may have. Maybe not.
Maybe in the mismatches. I'm not actually sure what was behind the flows that were being generated. So I'm not really sure if it was a login or phone home, a Microsoft phone home.
Oh, slide 7, Kurt's helpfully put in the chat. So thanks, Kurt. Oh yeah, it's
Oh
about
yeah, yeah, yeah,
all the way down. It's
yeah.
easy when you know where to look.
Yep, yep. I'm not familiar offhand on that. Um, if anybody else is familiar with the Microsoft destinations for their phoning home.
Yeah, feel free to chime in either verbally or in the chat if you do. Kurt's second point was, I wonder if this discrepancy, I think this was referring to the app developers
Mm-hmm.
stack. Kurt, jump in if you think not. It was whether that discrepancy, whether get notice or fix, since it's mostly managed by two different teams.
Yes, and also there's a third team, the certificate management team. So what we have seen in our own customer networks as we assist them, their certificate management team refreshes certificates, but doesn't let the application team know, and or doesn't let the network stack team know. And typically, if for inbound inspection, those certificates are required to be pre-installed on the appliances. And what that happens is, since they're all in three different groups or operating independently and they don't typically communicate to each other, one group breaks another group's functionality.
Yeah.
It's more of not that they're not aware; it's more that they don't communicate.
Yeah. I mean, overall, to be honest, the 2.5% is not terrible. That's more accurate than perhaps some of the discussions we'd had previously might lead us to believe. So on the corporate side, clearly somewhat higher than that, I think, from your sort of home stats.
Yes.
But in the enterprise space, that's actually, yeah, the suggestion that so the SNI data was very inaccurate is not the case, albeit, potentially someone with bad intentions, could clearly misconfigure it deliberately. And I guess even with a sort of 2.5% mismatch, that underlines the point that it's worth sort of validating to make sure it's correct.
See, Arnold and Chris both have their hands up.
Yeah, I can say just to before we go on to those, I think Sergio, helpfully from Microsoft, has offered to check with his peers from the Windows team in Microsoft. So
Oh,
we
cool.
appreciate that, Sergio. And Dan has suggested it's likely Windows push notification services, but as the source for that data. Right, so Arno, then Chris, and then unless there are any other burning questions, I'll bring in Zied to give. This will lead in rather nicely, even though it's unrehearsed, to lead on with the enterprise sort of perspective on all of this. But Arno first, then Chris, and then we move on with Zied.
Yes, thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Bob. So just so Bob and I are obviously in the same company, so we are colleagues. And for those who don't know, this has been codified in the ECH internet draft, ECH deployment draft that we are working as a collective group. It is, in fact, I don't know yet how to, in Markdown, how to make an appendix properly. So it's section 12, but it's an appendix, in fact. So I think Dan Wing actually pointed out that I need to fix that, and it will be fixed at some point. But all of this is written in our internet drafts. So if you want to have a read at least, it's codified there. Thank you.
Good point. Thanks, Arno. Chris.
Yes, hello everyone. I just wanted to clarify what is meant by an SNI mismatch here. So is that when the SNI in the client hello simply does not exist in the certificate?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. Yep.
So I think one of your most popular mismatches was DNS.Google. So
Yes.
I guess you're saying DNS.Google is not in the certificate that Google issues.
That's correct. Yeah.
And yet it succeeds.
It succeeds. Correct. So the browsers and other devices don't typically care when they mismatch, as long as they get to where they're going.
Yeah.
It's the analysis equipment in the middle that cares. Because some products out there can say they can make security policies decisions without having to decrypt the traffic. Those types of devices are only going to be able to see any of the data that's in the clear, namely the client hello. Yeah. And so in the context of encrypted client hello, we kind of solve that. It's no longer in the clear. But you still potentially have an SNI mismatch, but now at a different layer in the handshake.
Indeed. Yep. That's really interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great, thanks, Bob. And I think for the implication of comments in the chat, you're happy to share your updated slides without the proprietary Broadcom message on them. So
I think it'll be fine. There's nothing. Everything's been anonymized. The stuff that wasn't anonymized is my own personal information, my own personal network, which, as you can see, really wasn't much of anything bad in there.
Perfect. Okay, well, if you wouldn't mind sharing post call, then I'll send those out to people.
Arnold,
do you want to jump back in before I bring on Zied?
Just Andrew, sorry, just a quick one as well. Please let's note that's one example, right? So it's not representative. We need many more companies to help us to confirm those data. But at least this is, an indication indeed. So the more we would get data, the better. At the moment, we are just giving the point that yes, SNI is unreliable, but in one context. If you change the context, it is very reliable. Thank you.
Yeah, fair point. We can't extrapolate from a sample of two, one from Bob's house and one from a client. That would be pushing it a bit. Even in the days of post-truth, I think that will be a stretch.
I can share some appliances with you guys if you wanted to do a study.
Right. Well, as I say, that segues fantastically well, despite being unrehearsed, to then try and get a sort of an enterprise perspective on this. So I'm hoping that Zied is on the call. Yes, it looks like
yes, I'm here.
Fantastic.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Andrew. To give me the mic for this. First of all, I don't have any slides to share here. So I didn't work on this this weekend, but I plan to share some points about this topic. So thanks to Arnaud, especially. First of all, I'm cybersecurity a consultant working for the large bank, which is BNP, but not only. And we worked with Arnaud for some points when we talk about the strategy for the traffic inspection for enterprises. And the question of SNI reliability was one of the most important one when we talked about the TLS extensions, especially the client hello encryption extension protocol and the draft that Arnaud mentioned here. So what I would like to share here, maybe 2 points. First of all, is that for this bank, we have wrote a paper for the bank in order to present to the management and the CISO group the implication of SNI or the client hello encryption protocol and what are the different recommendations. And then we presented it to the operation CISO, and there is a action plan which is taken into account. So we understand the implication of this new extension because we do a lot based on this. I will share my views, and I would like that it will be better discussion on this. So there is an action plan that I will share as well, and the 3 main points. The first one is that from an enterprise perspective, we need to cybersecurity teams needs to take into considerations the new protocols and to have like a watch on what is happening on the standardizations bodies. The second one is to inform legal and compliance about what is happening and what are the potential impacts. And the third one is about to make sure there is a representative from the banking industry or the European banking central bank to have someone representative in the standards bodies, organizations, in order to make sure that what is imposed to the banks is possible to be implemented, taking into considerations the different new protocols and extensions. Yeah, these are the main 3 points that were taken into account. So size group, for example, it takes the last point. From the analysis that we did, for sure, there is a lot of requirements from an enterprise environment. So we said that in an enterprise, there is no like democracy. So there is no open bar to internet browsing. So first of all, we need to do web filtering. We need to, as an example, we need to filter recreational entertainment web categories. And we need also to, for security needs, we need to do malicious and suspicious websites filtering. And this filtering is possible when we do web categorization. And web categorization is done based on some informations, and one of them is the SNI. We'll talk about this just later. The second one is to have data leak prevention policy enforced. So whether because of business needs, because we need to protect the business data and the most sensitive data, or in order to address some regulations policy from ECB, for example. So we need to protect sensitive data. So we need to have DLP. In order to do DLP, we need to inspect the traffic. And so TLS, one of the encryption protocols, we need to be in the middle. We need to inspect TLS and then do the DLP, enforce the DLP policy. The other requirement is to protect the enterprise assets. So basically, do inspect the traffic, do some malware scanning, have looking on the malicious activities and block them. And also another point, which is we do inspection, but we cannot do it for all. So for some legal constraints, for example, and this is one of the common requirements, is that we are not allowed to inspect health or finance user traffic. And for this, we need to make sure that these web categories are not inspected. So before 2018, as Bob Blair shared, for me, the main information that was used is the service certificate. Service certificate, we have the information about what is the services consumed and maybe other informations, so that we do the web categorization and then we can filter what we need to filter, or we can inspect, but not healthcare or finance or these kind of things. And since TLS 1.3, where the service certificate is encrypted and this information is hidden, now we have only the SNI, which is there, in order to identify which service, in order to do web categorization. So maybe it's not the only information. What we heard from the different vendors and even from Broadcom, we can confirm it with the colleagues here, is that the SNI is the information, the last piece of information that we have after the TLS 1.3, in order to have an information about the service which is requested by the user. And then maybe if you're talking about the proxy will replay TLS session with the server and then get the server certificate, and then we confirm the web categorization on these kind of things. But this is the last piece of information that we have. So if this information is hidden, we are convinced that we have a big problem from our point of view in enterprise environment. And this was the whole topic about this paper that was shared. And the risk is confirmed. So Now we are talking about when it will come and how and so on and so forth. But there is some action plans to be taken regarding this point. So what I would like also to share is that inspections, we do it in the both ways. So we're doing, when we talk about the user, the employee trying to browsing internet. So we need to be in the middle to inspect this traffic and to do all the scans or inspections that we would like to do. And also all the other services, which are internet facing services. For example, we take the website of the bank, and this website is published in the internet. So we need also to be in the middle and inspect this traffic in order to at least do, for example, layer 7 attacks by scanning or these kind of things. So we need to do inspection both sides. And so this is about the requirement and what is behind this SNI. We also believe that from technical point of view, the SNI is by design, it's not really reliable. It's not the main object of the SNI to do web categorizations, but it's all what we have in order to do it, in order to have this information. This is what we think. And now, yes, we are talking about how we can use the DNS. So this was the point. And from my point of view, in enterprise experience, especially when talking about banking, we still have this private network. So we still have this Castellan mode architecture, and we have this private network. And the public addresses are not routable in this private network. Even the default route in main of the cases is not there. And we have explicit proxy, which is configured. When we have explicit proxy, meaning that the proxy is explicitly configured on the user browser. And in this case scenario, the DNS request is initiated by the proxy itself. So when we're talking about internet browsing, in this case scenario, maybe the proxy have some information about the DNS. So maybe to discuss about with the different vendors, how much we can use this information in order to do the filtering or to have the selective inspection or these kind of things. But what we can see, and even for the bank today, I discussed with other customers in other forums, we are moving from this explicit proxy to transparent proxy for performance or user experience requirements. And maybe in that case scenario, in the transparent proxy, the DNS request is initiated by the user in that case. And we don't talk about a private network like before. So maybe we are in the different architecture, which is already adopted by other enterprise customers. That's it. And this is my last point that I would like to share. That's it from my side.
Brilliant. Thanks, Zied. That's really helpful. Can I just clarify my understanding for transparent proxy, you need the SNI to use a transparent proxy. Is that right? Or is that not always the case?
For me, for both cases, SNI is required. Technically speaking, for me, my understanding, SNI is, as I said, if we would like to do the inspection, we need to understand which service the user trying to access to, and maybe do the web categorization in order to have, for example, the category of entertainment in order to block it if we are talking about web filtering, maybe to filter, to bypass the TLS inspection for healthcare or these kind of things. And today, with TLS 1.3, the server certificate is encrypted, the SAN is hidden, the only information that we have is SNI. Reliable or not, this is the only information that we have. And then, based on this, we will try to gather the server certificate. We will replay the TLS session in order to have the server certificate, in order to have the SAN, in order to do the right web categorization.
Yeah.
Now, if we say that, yeah, maybe we use DNS in that case, I can see a real challenge on the architecture itself, because if we have a look to the different enterprises architecture working for banks and also in my experience with manufacturers, we don't. There is the DNS communication is like an out-of-band communication channel. It's not an inbound communication channel. So there is no communication between devices and spectrum traffic and the DNS. So DNS is used only to resolve names, but not to do filtering or this kind of thing. So I really see a challenge. We don't have the architectures, or we don't do the web filtering based on the DNS today. So maybe in the future we need to change the strategy. But today we do it based on the proxy, and the proxy use the informations in the handshake messages of TLS.
Yeah, understood. Thank you. Any other questions from anyone? If so, put them in the chat if that's easiest, or sort of raise your hand, or just talk if no one else is talking, whichever is best for you. Either Zied or indeed if you've got any further questions for Bob, for that matter. Arno, did you want to come in? Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Zied. It's really important that enterprises can speak here, as they are mostly not present in IETF. So first, there is something that really bugs me at the moment. I was thinking about what you said earlier about BNP going to discuss with the ECB and so on and so on. There is the big DORA regulation that will be enforced 17th of January 25, and that's a big one. This is the Digital Operational Resiliency Act, and it's Article 1.1. It's about the protection, the security of network and information system. I don't remember exactly the wording. There is a tension between, on one side, what certain group of people want to do with ECH on IETF, and on the one about regulators. Now, it took me 15 hours to make my first read on DORA, and 4 hours just to read the first 106 preamble clauses. But what is striking is the ECB's role will be very limited here. The party that is really gaining a lot of power is the ESA, the European Surveillance Authorities, and there are 3 of them. One is on banking, one is on pensions, and one is on market surveillance. So maybe you want to indicate to your party that it's not just the ECB. Of course, I think the ECB will play a role, but I was very surprised to see the huge mechanics that we start from there. But anyway, it's really concerning to have such a tension between 2 groups that are diametrically going in an opposite direction.
Yeah, it's just an example, Arnaud. I took
okay.
that point from our last call, and we discussed it. It's ECB is an example, but for example, the CISO group will have a look from the big picture, maybe the different organizations, but not only ECB.
I see. Very good. Very good.
And Zied, I thought you made a good point about ideally you want some of the regulatory bodies to attend some of the standards organizations so that they can at least understand whether what they're imposing on their regulated industries are actually sort of doable by the industry, because potentially at the moment you'll be required to do things which will become increasingly hard for you to be compliant with, and then you'll probably be hit with big fines even though you can't actually comply, which is not a good position for anyone to be in. So yeah, it's an interesting point to get the regulators to go to the standards bodies to at least understand the constraints that you're operating under, which would be incredibly helpful. Who knows, maybe even participate in the standards process, and they could perhaps improve on the proposals as well.
At least they are now, the operations teams, they are asked to challenge the vendors about what are their plan. And because I discussed with different other customers as well in other forums, the question is, in generally speaking, we are relying on the vendors. So it's a problem. We understand the problem, but what are the vendors doing? What they are doing? What they're proposing? We, as a customers, as a bank, it's not my saying it differently. It's not my job in order to find a solution to this. But yeah, we understand, and this was the main of the points in the paper, is that for sure vendors will work on this, but as a customer, as an enterprise, we need to work on it. We need to have a watch on it and make sure that we have the big picture and we have all the new extensions and we understand their implications in order to make the right decisions and the right strategy.
Yeah.
And I think that now they understand, at least from my side, I can see a real understanding of the problem, which was not the case before.
Yeah, thanks. Right, Arno, last question or comment, whichever.
Yeah, so I will be short. I mean, it is really shocking, and we spoke to a large number of parties, very large customers, top 150. And the lack of awareness is really shocking, because the problem is that, to be very direct, it's not just ECH here which is at stake. There is a party that decided to fail an entire part of the defense. And this is written as a stated goal in an RFC, right? So it's all good to dream a dreamer, but if you have no migration path to move to a new world, it doesn't work. It will not work. You have a tension with two intentions from governments with another group of people in IETF, which is backed by certain dynamics there I don't want to quote now. And on the other side, this goes beyond that, because if ECH is one problem, wait for the rest. What are we going to do next? So I think enterprises, I think vendors cannot just do that battle, let alone at the moment. I don't see any other vendor that is on the issue. Certainly not in IETF, and we are not seeing anyone who actually realized. So I think we need enterprises to start to realize they are one group, one stakeholder that has a responsibility there. And it would be good to see enterprises there. So anyway, thank you for all of that, Zied. Of course, you speak to my mail, of course, sure.
Brilliant. Okay, well, let's draw a line under it there. Zied and Bob, thank you for sharing your points of view, which is really, really useful. And thank you. So you in the comments, Ed, you've offered to put some slides together to then allow that to be shared more widely, which would be really helpful if you can. So appreciate that. And dare I say it, seeing who else is on the call, maybe there's an opportunity for some of the sort of groups like Forrester to put out some briefing papers on this sort of topic. Just a suggestion, David. But this seems to be a hot topic for CISOs and others at the moment, so you can maybe get the jump on some of your competitors by putting something out on that. Just a thought. Right. Anyway, let's just briefly move on. So let me just remind you. Let's go back to the more mundane stuff quickly. Our agenda. Yeah, that was really useful insights from Bob and Zied. So thank you both very much for that. I will just briefly, within the time constraints, just say some more details are coming available on the IETF 118 sessions. Most but not all of the working group agendas are up. So briefly, one thing which surprised me, the TLS working group doesn't currently have anything scheduled on the agenda on ECH, which is a surprise. I was expecting to see something basically instigating a move to a working group last call, but that doesn't appear to be the case currently, or certainly wasn't this lunchtime. So that being the case, I'll sort of favouring in on the Monday sort of the DNRG working group looking at decentralization topics. Others are largely as previously discussed. The RASP research group, session 3 on the Monday, has got some really interesting content. Now the agenda is available on an internet standards tracker, communications patterns in the IETF, CDNs and states. So there's lots of really interesting stuff on the RASP research group session. Rolling through the week, I'll just see if there's anything else worth calling out. Yeah, on the Wednesday morning, session 1, the ADD working group has got 2 last call documents plus presentations on 2 new topics. So it's pretty content rich for ADD this time round. Sadly coinciding with that, the MAP research group is looking at various protocols, including Quick, DNSSEC, and RPKI. And then just Thursday, IETF Open, got 3 really fascinating papers lined up, one of which automatically finding RFC compliance bugs in DNS name servers, plus some others as well. And then finally on the Friday, the Mimi group on the Friday, that's the second of 2 sessions got scheduled. The Friday one, there's 2 user discovery drafts for more instant messaging interoperability working group. I'll share the slides so you got the, well, I think about it, I shared these just before the call, so you should have sort of these plus links readily available. Briefly moving on to the weekly headlines, which again, those of you on the mailing list would have had these, so I won't go through all of these in detail, but Windows, Microsoft rather, late last week announced support for DNR within Windows Insiders. Sort of more details on the blog post, so have a look at there. That's good to see. Despite recently announcing support for encrypted client hello, Cloudflare has, I think within the space of 2 weeks, disabled support for ECH, although it's planning to re-enable it, quotes, shortly, I think by around the end of this year, I believe. The other one I mentioned, there's a really interesting blog post from AdGuard. You'll know I'm a fan of some of the AdGuard blog posts, just highlighting why ECH doesn't solve privacy for good, despite assertions to the contrary. And there's some sort of reasoning behind that on the blog post. Other stuff I'll just skip over principally. Note, since it was mentioned earlier by Bob, third from bottom, there's ad targeting in the Alexa smart speaker ecosystem. No great surprise there, but there's a paper that identifies how that works. And also, you'll see in the WE a DNS-related vulnerability amongst many other things. So there's a whole bunch of stuff there, and then other things that caught my eye. Various others, so other topics. One of which there's an AI summit in the UK this week. Not all the guests have been announced, but I believe it will be many of the states from around the world, plus some of the big tech companies are attending. So there's a flurry of news items, AI related. Also at the bottom, apparently, if you use Gmail, hackers can read your Gmail on any 2020 or later iPhones and Macs. So good luck with that. No new calls for papers and proposals I've noted this week. So the next one coming up is the OARC 42 meeting, which is at the end of November, so you've got a while for that yet. A whole bunch of meetings. There's still a few left this year. You'll see the top 3, and then pretty quickly we're into conferences for next year. But Prague next week for the IETF meeting, then RIPE at the end of this month, followed immediately afterwards by the Global Technology Summit in New Delhi. And then the next one I'm aware of, unless people tell me otherwise, is NANOG in early February. But feel free to drop me a line if there's anything else you want to highlight. In terms of these calls, no call next week, obviously, because many of us will be in Prague. We'll talk about some of the highlights the week after. I'm trying to schedule with the author of a paper, a colleague of Ralph's at Akamai, see if he's able to join us on the 20th to talk about the challenge ahead for HTTP 3 or Quick, but that's not finalized yet. And then at the end of this month, I know I've moved this around a bit, but we will have the blockchain and Ethereum name services discussion. Two of the team from the DNS research group are joining us to lead that discussion, so that's now confirmed in the diary. And for the avoidance of doubt, we will not have calls on Monday the 25th of December or Monday the 1st of January, so I'm sure you'll be disappointed, but there you are. We won't do that. And pretty much on the hour, that's everything from me. I just pause in case anyone does have any other business in the last 60 seconds or so. So if you do, raise your hand or put something in the chat. I'll pause to see if anybody does. I see Simon's put in the chat that the gov.uk will have I think the output from the AI summit. So thanks for confirming that, Simon. And I see Ralph has indicated that Nanog has changed date, so I'll check my list if I've got that wrong and update that. So thanks for flagging that, Ralph. That's good to know. That means that OARC presumably will also change, because that was the following Thursday and Friday. I can see some things popping in already in the chat on the AI Summit. So anyone else has got anything to share on that, perhaps drop me a line or add it to the news headlines for next week, along with some of the highlights maybe from the AI Summit, if those are available by then. Okay, well, we're a minute over, so apologies for that. But thanks again, Bob and Zied, for giving us your insights. That was really helpful. And so to get both of those points of view is especially useful. And who knows, maybe some of the key takeouts will be appearing on a Forrester briefing anytime soon. You never know. Anyway, on that note, thanks everyone for your time. Have a fantastic week, and hopefully see some of you in Prague next week. And who knows, maybe over a glass or two. That's always a good thing. So see you all there. Thanks, everyone.
Yes.
Bye all.
Yeah.
Yes.